of Deuteronomy in the Bible, God commands his people, the Jews, to exterminate the 7 nations that lived in Canaan. Let me read you the passage in question. God says, "In the cities of the nations which the Lord your God is giving you as an inheritance, do not leave alive anything that breathes, completely destroy them. The Hittites, the Amorites, Canaanites, Perizzites, Hivites, and Jebusites, as the Lord your God commanded you." And that seems a terrible thing for a God of love to command. How could God, who, we believe, loves everyone, order his people to exterminate 7 whole races? Well, the answer, I believe, can be found up here. For this is Gezer, one of the Canaanite cities that was destroyed by the Israelites, one of the cities that God commanded to be exterminated. And just over there is the answer to why God made such a harsh decree. And here's the answer. This line of standing stones. When R.A.S. McAllister excavated at Gezer, he discovered these standing stones and called them a high place. And around the bases of the stones, he found a number of clay jars, sealed, and inside the jars were the cremated remains, ashes, bones of babies. And he concluded that this was a place of human sacrifice. Now, it's only fair to add that there are other interpretations. It has been suggested that this was simply a burial place, that people were ordinarily buried here. But in that case, of course, one has to wonder why so few ended up here. But there's another reason why I don't believe this was just an ordinary place of burial. You see, when McAllister dug in the rest of the city, he found buried beneath the foundations of some of the houses the remains of adults and 1 or 2 children as well. Not every house, just some. Now clearly, you don't bury people in the foundations of your houses if they've just died of old age. These were burials for a purpose. They were dedication offerings, dedication sacrifices. People buried in the foundations, perhaps even buried alive, in order to ensure the good fortune, the good luck of the house, the building, and all those who lived in it. And that's why I don't think that these stones were just an ordinary place of burial either. They were a place of sacrifice, where babies, children, possibly even a few adults, would be offered up on the stone of sacrifice, the altar down there. Let's go and have a look at it. Well, of course, now that I'm down here, you can see just how high these stones are, how massive they are. It must have been very impressive coming here to take part in the religious ceremonies, because, of course, in those days, up there wouldn't have existed. The tell hadn't risen by that amount. This would have been the highest point. And people would come from all over the city, perhaps even from the surrounding countryside, in order to bring their sacrifices, an animal perhaps, or a child. And the child would be brought over here to the stone of sacrifice. Now, we don't know exactly what ceremonies took place here. There are no descriptions of the ceremonies at this high place. We don't know whether the babies were killed with a stab in the heart, a quick slash across the throat, or whether, as some have suggested, a fire was kindled in this hollow here, and the baby was placed upon the hot coals to roast slowly to death. It screams a pleasing sound in the ears of the cruel gods of these people. You know, a few years ago in Britain, There was a story in the newspapers about this man who for some reason began to hate his stepdaughter, a little girl of 5. And one day he took her upstairs to her bedroom, shoved her inside, and locked the door. And then he went downstairs and carried on with his life. Days passed, weeks, until finally the police and the social workers, alarmed by the child's continuing absence, came to the house and searched it. And in that upstairs bedroom they made a grisly discovery. For there lay the emaciated body of this poor girl. And when they did the post-mortem, they found in her stomach shreds of wallpaper that she had picked off the wall and eaten in a desperate attempt to assuage the pangs of her hunger and thirst. What punishment do you think that man deserved? Do you think that mindless cruelty could be adequately recompensed by a few sharp words from the judge? By a £50 fine? By 3 months imprisonment, suspended? I don't know about you, but I tell you, if I'd been in the same room as that man, what can you say? What punishment could possibly be adequate, short of death itself? And yet here was not just an individual, not just a family, but a whole culture, a whole society that regarded the murder of children as a matter of course. Is it any wonder that God ordered his people to exterminate this society? Is it any wonder that a God of love commanded that these people should be wiped out? You know, if he hadn't, if God had overlooked this sort of cruelty, this sort of child abuse, that's when I would be questioning whether he really was a God of love. But of course, the Jews didn't destroy the Canaanites. They left them alive. They made them pay tribute, they conquered them, they made them work for them as slave labor, but they didn't exterminate them. And Gezer survived. Behind me you can see some of the excavations from the later periods of Gezer's history. In fact, we're even told that when Solomon, the wisest king, married Pharaoh's daughter, Pharaoh came and captured the city again and gave it to Solomon as a dowry for his daughter. And thereby hangs the rest of the story. You see, when God commanded the Israelites to exterminate these other tribes, he had a very specific reason why they were to do it. Let me read it to you. In this same chapter in Deuteronomy chapter 20. Otherwise, that is, if you don't wipe them out, otherwise they will teach you to follow all the detestable things they do in worshiping their gods. The biblical record is that after Solomon married Pharaoh's daughter and married many other women of foreign lands, not from Israel, in his old age, his wives were able to persuade him to worship these other gods, the gods of the nations that the Israelites had failed to exterminate. And the Bible tells us that Solomon, the wisest man that ever lived, made his own children pass through the fire as a Moloch sacrifice. Does that seem incredible? But it's what happened. It's something that God foresaw. Looking down into history, he saw that this is what would happen. And because he loved the unborn generations yet to come, he commanded that the Canaanites should be exterminated. He loved their children yet unborn and didn't wish to see them suffer in the same way that their predecessors had. And he loved the children of Israel, yet unborn, and didn't wish to see them led astray, and their children cruelly put to death. But some people say, oh, but isn't it terrible that God should want to destroy? Oh, it's awful. But because they didn't destroy, that was when the suffering, the pain, the cruelty, the horror came. Sometimes what God commands is tough, but sometimes God knows best.